honourable senators and representatives, board members of this august body, APIL, my dear friends and colleagues, folks joining us from the Guam Legislature, it is my great honour to provide you with an update on our initiative, Connect the Blue Continent. Half a day. So it's been a little tradition of mine to show some photos at the start of my presentations, so forth. Of course, it's been wonderful to be hosted here in the Guam Legislature, and they've done a wonderful job, especially at such short notice. So thank you to all of the professional team here at the Guam Legislature for all your hard work. However, I do miss you. So I have a few photos that remind us of that beautiful place. The fantastic food, of course. Food is Joe's favourite here. The wonderful traditional buildings. Here's Joe popping down to the bank. I think he's counting the count here. Sorry, Joe, but here you are. I think one thing the races is hand carried. Of course, such a wonderful memory of this in the traditional village in the app, and wonderful, amazing dancing and cultural activities, fantastic. Of course, the wonderful people wonderful journey into the future, into the digital age. I think that's really why I've been coming back and talking to you over the last couple of weeks. And the three parts of the puzzle, I think, that we need to concentrate on. The infrastructure, obviously, connectivity infrastructure is key. But so are the systems. You can't just connect the wire, you have to have the systems that allow you to then take part in healthcare. Obviously, so we'll hear some of the stuff about telehealth later today. You have to be part, you have to have systems to allow you to be part of the education sector and so on. And of course, we need to make sure skills are developed, online skills, so that particularly our younger generation become au fait and familiar with the technology, and you can drive it yourself, utilize it, become in charge of your own journey in terms of use of technology, harnessing technology in the future. And we've covered in various presentations why is this important? And we've gone into the idea of network services and education, a bit more about that. We've also talked about the future of public services. I think like Ireland, Reading, large about why it's important to improve the systems and delivery of public services more efficient, more productive, lower costs, and more inclusive to good stuff going on today, which I think we need to share across the alliance. Which already adds up to a more sustainable future, I think. And we're working out that, bearing in mind that this is a body, the legislative branch of government, a regional legislative body, we worked out that these four things are probably what we should focus on initially. It's really about policy influence, awareness raising, perhaps building some regional consensus so that we can get the funding and get these sort of initiatives flowing across the region. And really take that up and maybe even overtake some other regions of the world in terms of policy, getting economic and social benefits. Funding is a real key issue. It's not everything important, but it's important, very important. So far what we've done is we've passed some resolutions to provide a kind of foundation of intent to take forward this initiative, the 23 policy, and create a sister relationship between the non-profit that I'm busy creating in Australia, Digital Society Foundation, and APIA. Since then, what we've done is we've started writing letters to various bodies around the world, drawing attention to the initiative. In the last session, you'll recall that I went through the online campaign with the Facebook presence, www.facebook.com/Blue Continent. And we've also created a blog site, www.connectthebluecontinent.net, really aimed at talking to the aid ecosystem and the government aid bodies to say, hey, this is becoming a priority. Can you take a look at your policies and reorient them, because it's vital as well as get connected, get the systems and the skills. That's what we've done so far. I want to talk to you today about progress with key stakeholders, who we've been talking to, and where are we up to with course, there's corporate social responsibility. So this is where business, essentially. Can everybody hear me clearly? Can we turn up the microphone slightly, please? Would that be better? Is that better? I can speak loud as well if you want me to. There's no problem. Right, so first group. So we've written and been speaking with the UN, both the Secretary Secretariat and the International Telecom Union. So the ITU is the main ICT
Good morning.
Information and Communications Technology body in the UN, and the UN has formed this broadband commission at the world level. It's these folks that are really beating the drum about the importance of affordable broadband for economic and social development in communities around the world. To the point where they're really mounting an argument to say that it's a human right to be able to connect to the internet and to allow people to share with the world's knowledge and take part in collaboratively utilising that knowledge. So I think the Broadband Commission is a really important body to support our mission to connect to the continent. So we've spoken to a number of the members of the commission. We have sound. I've spoken to a number, thank you. I've spoken to a number of members of the Broadband Commission directly, and we're in contact with these folks. And our main issue is to make sure that the Blue Continent gets some attention, and they understand that this region also needs the support from the UN and world funding bodies to allow us to get the connectivity we need. You're aware, of course, of the World Bank Pacific Connectivity Program. That's an important program, and we've spoken directly with the folks in charge of that program, and they often work with the ADB, and there's existing project for Palau and for Yap, and we've spoken to them about Kosrae and Chuk, and one of my biggest concerns is Kiribati. And at the moment I don't see any slot in that program for Kiribati. And I think we need to mount a bit of a campaign to get Kiribati at least on the agenda for World Bank and ADB support for connectivity. I'm still looking around. There are various other UN bodies as well. I'm still looking around for who do we think are the most important stakeholders here. If you guys think of anybody that we're not talking to, please come and chat with us, and we'll figure out how we can reach them. Okay, so for the second group, donor governments. Obviously, being in Australia, I have spoken to AusAid, which actually has been disbanded now and folded into the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I think it's fair to say that we need an ongoing dialogue with these folks to convince them that connectivity is important. Their initial view was, we tried that 10 years ago, there was a big push for a network in the Pacific and it didn't work, and we don't think the individual governments are really asking for connectivity as a high priority. So that's a disappointment to me. I think it's important that if you believe that this is a priority, then please make it clear to the Australians that that's what you believe, and let's see if we can influence their policy and support the connectivity. USAID, I get the feeling, that USAID is starting to come round to understanding this. They've joined a couple of world initiatives on connectivity, so I think that's good news. I don't know anybody personally at USAID,
but I would like to think that they would be on our side. So perhaps if anybody does know some of the key individuals at USAID, we could chat further. I have started to research the aid bodies in Japan and China and so on, and the general message I'm getting is that Asia is one of those places in the world where there is money, there's financing, they're growing, they're willing to fund things. The message isn't clear to them that connectivity is a priority. So I think my message to you folks is, you're important. You're obviously key leaders. If you can get that message across to those aid bodies that it's important, that would help us enormously. And I think there's some room for European aid organisations to help because of the background to the history of some of the island communities. I think the Europeans will definitely come to the party if there's clear enunciated requests from your governments. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about this category, philanthropy. Being an IT person, I'm obviously interested in IT companies that might help us. And there's a couple of new organizations that have started up quite recently. One called internet.org. If you go to that site, you'll see that they're focused on helping developing world jurisdictions get affordable internet. And the second one is called the Alliance for Affordable Internet, and it's a body based in Washington. It's actually based at the World Wide Web Foundation. That's the people that manage the web. And they have created this organization called the Alliance for Affordable Internet, specifically to look at how to create affordable connectivity in developing communities around the world. So I've got a few slides. I think these are fairly important stakeholders for us. I've got a few slides just to introduce you to this organization. So their focus is, in particular, is affordability. And here are some statistics. You can read these for yourselves, but the key here is that really what they're saying is that in a lot of developing jurisdictions, the retail price of internet is too high, and that's a major barrier to the take-up of the internet. And I think we have that problem in some of the island jurisdictions where we have got cable. We haven't actually managed to create affordable retail products, and that's really a key issue. And the measure these guys are using is they're saying the price for your internet service at home should be less than 5% of the average gross national income per capita, okay? And what they're seeing is that in some countries it's up at 30 or 40%. In other words, the prices are too high, and that's acting as a barrier to economic and social development. I see that happening in the islands. I think these folks can help us. This is their focus. So by hooking in with these folks, I think we can get some technical assistance and some lobbying assistance to make sure that what we actually end up with is affordable for the communities and for the businesses on the islands. So here are just some of the numbers that they've come up with, okay? And we can share these slides with you guys. I think Walden puts it up on the website, so if these are useful to you, that's great. One interesting number is that what they're saying now is there's pretty much just as many people in the developing world on the web, on the internet, as there is in the developed world. The numbers are about the same. But when you look at the number of people not on the internet, there's something like 10 times as many people in the developed countries not on the internet as there is on the internet. And so both internet.org and this A4AI are really focused on how do we get all of these communities, the missing communities, onto the internet, and therefore gaining the economic and social benefits. Now, I've spoken about, why is it important? Well, here is their message on why is it important. And they've used these words, which I found interesting. They've talked about health, they've talked about education, gender, which is something that I haven't really covered, but gender opportunities, which is another good one. Agriculture, in terms of access to markets and access to market pricing and so on and so forth, which I think is key for some of the island communities here. And citizenship, which is really about connecting citizens and the public services and government. So that's their view on why is internet so important for communities. And here's their mission. I think it's pretty good line up with what we're trying to achieve. They're using a target of 40% take up in each community. So what they're looking for is 40% of households, 40% of businesses, having affordable high-speed internet. And it's at 40% where the benefits start to flow, where you really start to get the economic and social benefits. So who's part of this alliance? Well, they've already got some pretty big names. Google, USAID has joined it, which is good, and some of the other donor government organisations. Some pretty big corporate bodies. These are sort of worldwide bodies with billions of dollars at their disposal. So I think this is a good sign that the corporate world is keen to see internet take up. These are government bodies around the world that have also begun to join. And here are some other foundations, the Ford Foundation and others that have joined this push for affordable internet. And today I'm announcing that Digital Society Foundation has been directly in touch with Washington, and we have joined this alliance ourselves, mainly because we want to make sure that this region is represented. And when I spoke to the folks in Washington, they said basically that there wasn't anybody from the Pacific Islands talking to them. So by joining, we're hoping to at least start to have a voice for this region at the sort of world collaborative level, to make sure that we're represented and they take some notice of our needs. Okay, I won't talk any more about those folks, but there's a little bit more information in the slide pack. So that's the third category, philanthropy. Again, if there are others you think we should be talking to, please let me know. We're really keen to understand, who are the main stakeholders. On Group 4, I've been chatting with SPT for a while. They've got this regional ICT strategy that's part of the Pacific Forum overall strategy. But you might be aware that the Pacific Forum has just carried out a big review. And the results of that review, really on the relevance of the Pacific Forum and its plan, has just been published, and I understand it's been given to the leaders of the chief executives, effectively, I think, and the governors around the islands. It hasn't been made public yet, that report. It sounds to me like they're looking at political regionalism as their main push. I have corresponded and spoken directly with the people doing the review and explained to them about connectivity and how important it is. And they tell me informally that was a message they were getting all around the islands. But they had an attitude that they felt it wasn't a regional issue, it was a national government issue, and it was really up to each national government to push forward with connectivity. So I argued a little bit with them on that, and I feel that the region does have a role, particularly in the master planning, for a network that allows us to reach the smaller islands, places like Kiribati, but also the outer islands in Yap and in Pohnpei and Chuuk and so forth. I think we need a master plan, you know. And I think the region should really be supporting that master plan. So bodies like the Pacific Forum, I think, should be calling for that master plan. And I'll continue to have the dialogue with the Pacific Forum. And hopefully they've referred to that in their report. And we'll see when we get it. In terms of liaising with executive government, you know, the only two governments that I've spoken directly with are the government of Pohnpei and the governor there, and the government of Hawaii, where I also met with the governor and told him about Connect the Blue Continent, and in fact he was very keen to fund it. I said, we're not asking for funding, we're asking for support, but he said, no, we'll put funding in. So that was interesting. So I think there's commitment from Hawaii. The reason I've been speaking to Pohnpei is because the governor there, obviously they have fibre, and he's keen for it to bring the economic and social benefits that it can. And he's been speaking to me about this initiative, the World Park Initiative, the strategy for Pohnpei, and the alignment between that strategy and the need for connectivity, the need for really for driving economic and social benefits. So we're discussing the idea of making Pohnpei like maybe a showcase. If we can pull lots of programs into Pohnpei, we can showcase how that connectivity can drive, in an island context, the economic and social benefits. So that's an active discussion we're having. I'm keen also to talk to the marshals. The marshals have a fibre optic cable there. Already there are some benefits. I can see some economic benefits flowing in the marshals. Perhaps if I'm lucky enough to come to the next session, if we do have it at the marshals, then under your guidance, perhaps I should be speaking with the executive team there. Google has been the main people that I've liaised with in this category. Google have given me a written commitment that they will help the islands. What they've said is, we will be willing to, one, provide deployment of Google Apps to educational institutes and the training to go with it. And two, we will enable the creation of communities for entrepreneurs, supporting business owners and supporting ICT workers like software developers and so on. We will help those communities with training and free software and so forth, okay? And they felt that infrastructure was the main challenge. They said, if you can sort the infrastructure out, Chris, we will come to the party with more programs to help the islands. Now, I've also said to them, if I convince the Pacific Forum to do a master plan, will you provide some in-kind support? Will you get your engineers to work with us and come up with a master plan for connectivity? And they have said yes. So I think, Google is a good example of the sort of corporate assistance that we can bring into the islands. And they have started a dialogue with some NGOs to bring these sort of programs to fruition, okay? So I'm going to move on to the last part of my talk now. Sorry, before I mention that, I should mention that I think there's two more groups. The group of universities. It seems clear to me that universities and learning institutes are important stakeholders. Clearly we need to get skills on the islands, and that means getting the skills to the teachers and to the schools and to the universities to allow there to be a generation of kids growing up familiar with the technology. So I think universities are pretty important stakeholders. And I've started to talk to the University of the French Polynesia, the University of based in Fiji. I think it's called South Pacific, University of the South Pacific, University of Guam, and the University of Hawaii. And I think these stakeholders are important for us. Here's an example of a university outside, this is in Switzerland. And this is one example of many universities that have said to me that they will help. They have knowledge and skills which they will connect through to the islands via the existing university and school fabric that you've got in place. I think many different learning institutes will help us to build the skills in the Pacific. It's really just a question of collaborating. And the two main reasons I'm talking to these guys is because they have e-learning for tourism. I think that lines up really well with the World Park strategy in Pohnpei, and I think it lines up very well also with Palau's push for sustainable tourism. So this is about helping the tourism industry use e-learning to improve their understanding of marketing the destination online. You know, how do you get online tourism to help support your tourism strategy? The first one was teachers, the second one was tourism, sorry. So they're focused on teachers, helping teachers, and they're focused on helping tourism, which I think are really the perfect fit, okay? Now I have a 3-minute video made by the professor. I wonder if we, Chair, do we have time to play that?
We are actually running out of time, but
okay. So maybe what I'll do is I'll skip that, but if you're interested to hear directly from the professor, he's made a short video to explain to you how he thinks this might assist you. So please come and speak to me, and we'll have a look at that video when we have time. Okay, and I'll move to my final slides. Okay, so just to finish off, next steps. I think the key is how do we get these initiatives to actually start flowing? So how do we get the sort of things that Google are promising to do, the sort of things that are promised in the strategy from SPC, the sort of things that universities are saying they could do to help us build the skills, how do we get those to flow? I think there are two things that I wanted to really touch on. The first one is I think I want to explain to you the concept of co-working. I think co-working is going to become a critical way to get the islands to connect in with this digital age training. So I'm going to talk to you about that. And secondly, in order for me to continue doing this, Connect the Blue Continent, you know, I've been struggling with funding to come and see you in each of these meetings. So I've come up with a corporate sponsorship approach, which I wanted to share with you in order to really get the funding that the initiative needs to carry on talking to these stakeholders and carry on intervening, okay? So co-working, very quickly, co-working is a phenomenon that's happening in countries around the world, particularly in the communities of startup businesses. So in micro businesses that are starting up, a lot of youngsters who want to start businesses, instead of trying to find their own offices, etc., they've started to co-locate. They've started to share office space with each other and share overhead costs like internet connectivity and so forth. And they found it to be a really effective way to drive economic activity in an accelerated way. So what's actually happening is some infrastructure, old buildings, sometimes old schools, old hotels, buildings that perhaps aren't, highly polished buildings, but these are buildings that IT people are quite happy to work in, you know? And so what's happening is these buildings are often rented out for pretty low cost, and businesses are getting together. Youngsters are saying, well, I want to start my own business. They get together and they share the costs in the building, and it starts to stimulate lots and lots of small micro businesses. But it does something else as well. It creates visibility of all of these businesses. Instead of having to try and track down, 20, 30, 40, 50 little tiny businesses who are working from their home, and maybe it's difficult to find their advertising and so on, by connecting them to a co-working place, even if they only go into that office once a week or so on, then it makes them visible, and training and assistance can be focused on these co-working spaces. And this is happening in cities, but also in regional, small regional centres across the US, across UK, Europe, in Australia too. And essentially, they are like very easy to access open places. This message gives you an idea. This is a message outside one of the places in Adelaide. And what it says is, essentially, you're welcome to come in any time, just bring your laptop. We'll give you the password, you can sit down at a desk, and you can start working and start collaborating with people. And what they're finding is that the dynamic of working with your small business, but having colleagues around you, means that you can start collaborating and grow your business more successfully, and start figuring out what other skills there might be around the place to help you drive your business. It's been highly successful. When I saw these buildings and I went in and I looked at some of these places, my thoughts turned to you guys, thinking this is just ideal for the islands, because once these are established, they start affiliating with each other, which means entrepreneurs, can visit an island and they can say, well, I'm a member of the co-working space on one island, so therefore I'm a member of this one too. You see what I mean? And they can start creating sort of a collaborative business environment. And particularly for ICT style businesses, so particularly for people involved in technology, this is a really important infrastructure. So please come and talk to me if you're interested in knowing more about co-working. I think, I have a vision that this will help us speed up economic and social development and adapt technology for the context of the islands. So I'd love to talk to you more about this. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, in order to continue this initiative, I need to find a way to fund both coming and giving you these updates, but also liaising with the various stakeholders. It seems to me that I really need to get out to Pompeii and talk to the executive team doing the World Park strategy, drag Google in there, and make these things happen. And that's going to require funding. So what I've done is I've put together a corporate sponsorship package. The first corporate body I've approached is the ANZ Bank. And I've gone to the ANZ, or you say ANZ Bank, because they have a Pacific strategy, and it seems to me that it's in their interests for there to be more successful economic activity in the Pacific, and therefore it's in their interests for Connect the Blue Continent to succeed. If you guys can think of other corporates that you think might be interested in sponsoring this initiative, it would be great to hear from you. I'd love to chat with you further about how we might be able to find some funding for the initiative going forward. So that's me, folks. Thank you very much for your time, and please feel free to ask any questions now or later. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Let's give him a hand. Thank you for the update on connecting the Blue Continent. We'll save all the questions and discussion after all the presentations are done. But colleague, legislature, we are really privileged to have in the chamber with us our speaker, Ben Pangalina is with us. So if I can ask Mr. Speaker to please rise so we can give you a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you for joining us this morning. At this time, we'll have all the question and discussions, especially with Chris, and I believe we'll have time after the other presentations to also play the videotape. So we'll then discuss further on his presentation. But at this time, we have the Micronesia Conservation Trusts. I believe they're in here, if they are in here. So we'll go ahead and give it to Frank Shmashi and then Jason Mayashati. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing the last name properly, but this time is yours. So please go ahead and make your presentation to the legislatures this morning. Thank you, Chris. Let's give Chris a round of applause again. Will you be using the screen at the front also? Okay, we'll then take a recess, 2-minute stress recess to give our Micronesian Trust time to set up. So let's recess for 2 minutes. Can you hear that? I believe they're ready for us, so if we can get back to our seats, please, and we'll continue. Okay, at this time, we'll give the opportunity for our colleagues and friends that have joined us, Micronesian Conservation Trust, to go ahead and make their presentation this morning. Please go ahead. Maybe the mic is not on. Is the microphone on? Okay, try it.
How about now? Is this better? Testing. Is there anybody that can hear me? Good.
Okay, how about now?
It's a little better,
Little
but
better?
still.
Okay, good morning. Um, my name is Frank Shimizu. Um, I'm a member of the Micronesia Conservation Trust. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees. Thanks very much for allowing us to present to you what MCT is all about. Try to make it fast so that we can go back to what we're doing. I can perhaps still make the tee off time at 11. What is the Micronesia Conservation Trust all about? Here's a brief agenda of what we're going to try to cover. It won't take long, I promise. Who we are, maybe also why we are here. What do we do? Where do we get our money? And if you will, allow me to talk a little bit about the Micronesia Challenge. After which, there will be an investment report done by Dan Rowland, who's the Senior Vice President, Asia Pacific for Morgan Stanley. And I also promise you that his presentation will be short and sweet. And he has a very good story to tell. Who is MCT? Well, it was established in 2002, so we're still pretty young. We're just teenagers, if you will. It's located in Ponape, the Federated States of Micronesia. A very lean staff when you consider the amount of money and the amount of projects and grants that it handles. It's a very, very lean staff of 8 full-time employees. They are governed with 10 Board of Trustees. 8 of those trustees are from the region, meaning they're domiciled in Micronesia. 2 of those trustees are international members, 1 in Washington, D.C., and 1 in Japan. Of those trustees, 2 are from Guam, myself included. It is Micronesia's only conservation trust fund. It's conservation focused, and it's a grant-making organization. It has handled in the short period of time that it existed assets amounting to already $13.5 million. And those assets, due to the primary efforts of Morgan Stanley, have grown and obtained profits for MCT to the tune of $2.25 million. Not bad. And later on, like I said, Dan is going to tell you the story. What is it that we do? Here are some of the items. Capacity building and training support for biodiversity conservation, for adaptation programs for climate change, and believe it or not, climate change is not coming. It's already here. We want to push programs for sustainable development. This means that if you're part of the Micronesia Challenge, for instance, it's not that MCT is against development. It's just that you don't want to deplete your resources. You want to sustain it, build it if you can, and at the same time, promote development. MCT does a lot of financing in the area of fundraising, for instance. We fundraised to the tune of over $13 million already. It gives out grants to organizations and communities throughout all of Micronesia. And in some, as of now, as we speak, we've had, MCT has administered over $7 million worth in grants and regrantings. So it really tries hard to support and fund biodiversity conservation programs that help the communities in this area, help the communities adapt to climate change. It administers and supports programs that will try to eradicate invasive species, and they've been very successful in some of the smaller islands in the FSM. It also supports programs and efforts to improve fisheries management. Again, climate change is not coming, it's already here. With MCT, it cannot survive by itself. It needs partners. It needs partners that are willing to participate, and here are some of them. It includes local resource owners, which includes individuals, maybe even companies. It includes mayors and traditional leaders, local government, the legislature and the governors, conservation NGOs, and a whole list of a couple of hundred scientists and technical support people, including our own resource here in Guam, the University of Guam Marine Lab, scientists from Hawaii, University of Hawaii, from the US mainland, Asia, and Europe. So where does it get its money? How is it funded? Here are just some of our major donors and technical partners. The Global Environment Facility, Nature Conservancy, Conservation International, David and Lucille Packard Foundation, Margaret A. Cargill Foundation. These two foundations are one of our major contributors and partners. In the United States, we have several agencies, including the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, the Department of Interior, the U.S. Forest Service, and NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. If you'll allow me just to speak a little bit about the Micronesia Challenge. It's a long, complicated process, but I'll try to be brief, and here are some of the bullets that I want to share with you. The Micronesia Challenge is an agreement in the very beginning between 5 major islands, including Guam, Saipan, Yap, Chuuk, Ponape, Kosrae, that make up the FSM, the Republic of Palau, and the Marshall Islands. After that agreement, these 5 nations became committed and are committed to partnering to effectively conserve natural resources. What I mean by that is that these nations agreed to set aside the 30-20 principle. 30% of its near-shore marine resources and 20% of minimum, 20% of its terrestrial resources for conservation, for capacity building, and put it under effective management. 30-20. That's an honorable goal. It's a goal that exceeds other nations, many other nations. A most significant event occurred in 2006 when these 5 nations selected MCT to manage the MC endowment. So with the Micronesia Challenge, what is MCT's role? Sorry. To work with all the stakeholders and all the partners that I've listed previously, to work to achieve the Micronesia Challenge goals, fundraise for this MC initiative, and we've done that successfully. It is now 13.5 million and climbing and increasing, thanks to you guys. We want to build the funds that we've received into an MC endowment fund. We mentor Micronesia Challenge champions in all of the islands. We strive to build capacity, and finally to invest. Got a question for you guys. Just think about it. What do you do when you see an endangered animal eating an endangered plant? Think about it. I gotta tell you, I posed this question to a bunch of third graders. I believe they're third graders. It could be fourth graders. And one little girl immediately said, "Mr. Shimizu, it's easy. You find out if those two are edible, and if you can eat it, you better eat it now before it's gone forever." I didn't know how to answer that. I really didn't. So with that, I want to introduce to you to talk about another good story about our investments, Dan Rowland. So thank you very much. And by the way, my apologies to American Samoa, Nauru, Kiribati, and Hawaii. They're missing up there. They're missing in action. I'll make sure that the next time they're up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Good morning.
Morning.
While he's getting set up, let me introduce myself. Actually, you had mentioned Jason Miyashita. He is my junior partner. He's in Saipan today with the Council of Micronesian Chief Executives, so I'm here in his stead. Hopefully I'll be able to do as good a job as he would. Anyway, I'm a senior vice president of Morgan Stanley and a senior institutional consultant with Morgan Stanley's consulting group. I'm based here in Guam, and I have an office also in Honolulu. I became involved with Micronesia Conservation Trust when they issued an RFP for investment consultant back in 2008. And so we were lucky enough or fortunate enough to be hired in that role in December of 2008 when we started with the fund. So I only have a 2-page presentation. Most of its numbers hopefully won't be too boring, but if you have any questions, ask. Or I'm always prepared with business cards. If you'd like to see me afterwards and get a copy, we can correspond by email. And with that, if I can figure out how to use this. Oh, thank you, Frank. What I did was to put together a very brief summary of how the money came in and how it's basically done. Frank's presentation had the performance through September, but I'd like to keep people as up to date as possible. So this is actually end of November. So if you read the chart at the top, it shows the contributions from the various entities that Frank mentioned, Conservation International, and other entities. So you can see when you were hired in December of 2008, there's initial contribution of $1.5 million, and we've had ongoing funds coming in over that time. We had the largest funds, of course, come in the last 2 years. As you can see, that's 3/4 of the fund, basically. The total contributions to date have been, although I understand there's an additional 500,000 that is supposed to be coming in perhaps this week, but we've had $11,517,711 in contributions. The ending market value as of November 31st was $14,134,000. The net return has been $2,606,289. As a consultant, I like to think in percentage terms because you really need to know relatively how you're doing. So if you look below, you can see, can everybody see? It's a little bit low, but from left to right, it's shorter periods to longer periods. So the first column is a fiscal quarter to date, which is September 30th through November 30th. And the blue numbers are the fund's net returns. So fiscal year to date, we earned 4.35. Fiscal quarter date, excuse me, is 4.35%. And in our investment policy, we set two objectives. One is a objective relative to what the markets are doing, which is objective 1, the policy index. And objective 2 is a static benchmark based on what our asset allocation model says that your expected return should be given the capital markets. So you can judge how the fund is doing relative to those two benchmarks in the different periods. So that's a fiscal quarter to date, fiscal year to date, which is a December fiscal. We're up 14%. Trailing 1 year up, we're at 16.6. Trailing 3 years at 8% annualized. And since we started, we're at 9.29%. So with the exception of the 3-year period where we're a bit behind the policy index due to a particular manager who had a really tough time in about an 18-month period, we're doing very well, including the longer periods. So I think everybody's been pretty pleased with the results so far. On the next page, which is a very busy page, and I won't necessarily get into in depth, but as the fund has grown in size, we've been able to diversify among different asset classes, which is a prudent thing to do to diversify risk and hopefully increase returns. So we've added non-U.S. equities, more recently emerging market equities, non-U.S. fixed income, again with the idea of diversifying the assets to reduce volatility. So at this point, we're pretty happy with the asset mix. As the fund continues to grow and we get up to 500 to 50 million or 100 million, which will probably be a couple more years, we'll look to diversify further, but that's where we stand, and that's really my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions. I think you were talking about having a session later for questions, so in that case, I'll defer till then.
Let's give Dan a round of applause.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike Rinja, Conservation Trust, for the presentation. If we have the telehealth people that were supposed to make presentation here, Mark Kane, I believe, then this is your opportunity. It's your time. Looks like we will have to take a 5 minutes break according to, instead of break, maybe we can go ahead and ask questions and utilizing the time since we just had a break. We can't have too many breaks. But, well, actually he's here, so. Okay, if Chris is here, we can go ahead while Mark is setting himself up to the projector up here. If we can go ahead and recognize our senator from Guam to go ahead and pose a question for Chris.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Chair. Chris, during your presentation, you made an excellent observation for Google and their generosity. You mentioned that they would match engineering opportunities and the like if we would be committed to the infrastructure. Do you have even a general idea what the infrastructure means for them to bring about the match with engineering capability?
Thanks, Chris. Can everybody hear me okay? Yep.
Sounds good.
Yep, good. I think the issue with Google was really a question of them saying, well, we want to help, but we don't know how to connect with the people that need the help. And they talked about 4 communities: the community of teachers, the community of students, the community of startup entrepreneurs, business entrepreneurs, and the community of ICT technology folks. Okay, and so we spoke about infrastructure in 2 ways. One way was, how do we get the connectivity, the infrastructure that requires connectivity? So the strategy was about, some islands have connectivity, some islands don't, and we needed two strategies, one for those that do have it and ones that don't have it. And then for the ones that do have connectivity, we spoke about the infrastructure, something like co-working, to bring those communities to the forefront, so Google and others would know, how could we help the right people? Educational institutes are the obvious place for teachers and students, but for business entrepreneurs and for technology people, we need to create that visibility, and that's what I think co-working infrastructure would help. Okay? Does that answer your question, Chris?
It does. So I guess for our members, I guess what it really comes down to that we're seeing, and maybe through the bigger islands, this is where we can really come in and play in terms of our relationship, since we got a lot of local companies that are already investing, and that would mean the developing the plan and the commitment infrastructure-wise to then go back to Google and say, okay, we're ready. We have co-working obligation that we've established. That would mean every traveler and business person going to these islands knowing that they have a kiosk center or a business center. And then from there, that would map their strategy, and the engineers could then come out from there. The second question I have for you, Chris, real quick, is in your presentation, you mentioned a lot of large organizations. I missed the Gates organization, and just simply because they are very, their main mission being education, did we not approach them, or are they on board and we just didn't mention them?
Okay, the Gates Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, is focused on health. Okay?
Okay.
That's their big thing. But I have approached them, and I think that at the moment they're really saying, where our funding is focused on health. As we get connectivity going, I think we can draw them into health-related projects, and in fact, it's a really good segue to the telehealth presentation that we're about to get here. So I think there's an opportunity to get Gates involved and get him funding. There's also an opportunity to get Microsoft and other IT companies involved in the supply of hardware and software and network equipment to help the islands.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Anyone else for Chris? Maybe we'll take one or two more, and then if this is not enough time, then we'll come back after the next presentation and ask more questions. But one or two more, or should we continue to the next presentation? Well, it looks like we're okay, Chris, for now. So thank you. Okay, at this time, I'll give the floor to our next presenter, telehealth in the Blue Continent, and we have with us Mark Kane, who's the GO of the Asia Pacific Regional Laboratory and Health Services. So please, let's give him a round of applause. Just a brief announcement for our lunch today will be at 12 o'clock, and it's going to be here in the, I believe, the same room that we've had our refreshments before. And it'll be hosted by Pew Environmental Group, one of our partners. So we want to share our appreciation and thank them for that. And we'll all be joining each other and continue to discuss these issues that especially have been presented to us during the lunchtime, if you wish to do so. So let me just give this time to Mark now to go ahead, please.
Good morning. Nice to be here with you. Thank you for this opportunity. This presentation I put together just in the last few days after being asked to speak here. So it's not data that I've discussed many times, but it's fresh data. Just as a bit of background, I'm a nurse practitioner. Nurse practitioners do much the same thing that physicians do. I've had private practice for about 40 years. My specialty is obstetrics, gynecology, pediatrics, and family care. So I make babies and deliver them. And I delivered my first baby when I was 16. So I'll admit I'm old. I came to Guam first in 1996, and I worked for one of the major insurance companies here. And that was the first for me because usually I was the provider, and this time I was the payer. And it gave me a new outlook on that side of things. So out here in Guam and in the Blue Continent, we've had issues for decades on delivery of health care. One of my early jobs in the military has been working with FEMA Region 9. So I've had an opportunity to visit many of the islands here under my FEMA cap, and certainly that was under disaster conditions, so I was never able to really embrace the local cultures because we were there to do a job and to get people whole again and then leave. So part of this discussion is on telehealth. The research and the passion that myself and my other team members have had to bring new technologies and new opportunities to this region. We, myself included, I'm sure everyone's tired of having to leave the area and leave your family to go get advanced treatment in other areas. And many times that results in leaving also your family behind and your support system when you need to go get treatment for cancers or something that's critical, and your loved ones aren't around you and you're away from your spiritual home. So we're trying to work on some health systems to bring technology to your locations rather than you having to go to the technology. So the handout that I made, does everybody have this? Does anybody not have one? Rather than read what I'm going to give you up on the screen, I'll go through it quickly. I wanted to give you, this is much more information and bullet points that I would normally do on a PowerPoint presentation. I did that on purpose. It's meant for you to go back and read at your convenience, just as a primer to the discussions that we're looking at. So I'm going to go through fairly quickly so that we have time for questions. So just a definition. In the last few years, the definition of telemedicine, that's been in the news and that's been the buzzword. But telehealth is much more than telemedicine. Telemedicine is simply treating someone with a disease process or making a diagnosis. But telehealth involves the entire person. It could be spiritual health, it could be physical health, but it involves every discipline. It could be a microbiologist or a psychiatrist, psychologist, social worker. It doesn't have to be a physician or a nurse. So telehealth is a more global word, and that's what you're going to see moving forward in a lot of these discussions is the more global word telehealth. So that's what I'll use for purposes of our discussion today. Um, we, we've run into issues across territorial and state lines in the matter of even describing acronyms and those issues. So in the back of your handout, there's some definitions that you can go through later, just so that you see what the global community is talking about. So, telehealth services, it can consist of diagnosis and treatment, certainly assessments. Remote monitoring is one of the things that we don't need a lot of bandwidth for here, and something that we can do in virtually every location, even over a radio. So remote monitoring of a cardiogram or fetal heart rate or blood sugar. Most of the equipment that is built today is already built with monitoring capabilities, either through wireless like your telephone, Bluetooth, or Wi-Fi. And it's very easy to look at someone's blood pressure or their heart rate, monitor almost any vital sign that's necessary. And even most of the tests that we need to run, somebody has chest pain, looking at, for instance, their cardiac enzymes to see if it's a heart attack or heartburn. Those tests are easily done in any location. It just takes a few minutes to run it, and minimal training required. So we can deliver more advanced medicine without having to go back to college for 6 or 8 years to learn how to do that. So one of the additional benefits for telehealth in a global sense is education. We could provide education to members of every community in the Blue Continent to do certain testing, even small atolls that don't have a doctor or a nurse there. One of the elders could be trained to do screening tests, and those screening tests could then be transmitted by telephone. If you can get a cell phone, then you can transmit data on it. So we don't need a large broadband structure. And I wish I had heard the previous lecture. I understand you were talking about connectivity, and certainly that's one of my passions in this area. We've put a lot of money in over the years into the infrastructure for connectivity, and it's embarrassing to say that in almost 2014 we haven't fixed that problem. We should have connectivity everywhere. So without having to go to expensive satellites, I think we can. There are definitely some resources that were already discussed, some that may not have been discussed. There are some private networks that are going to the islands that are more than capable of transmitting any type of data that we want. The main type of telehealth that we use most frequently is video conferencing. In remote areas, video conferencing is the most expensive type of telemedicine to provide because it requires for high-level video, something that I could look at a wound on the arm or diagnose a skin cancer with, the very high resolution. If it needs to be live, you need broadband for that. But if I take a picture of it that's high resolution and it takes 20 minutes to transmit to someplace to look, I can do that with low broadband. And that can be over a cell phone or packet radio. So there's old technology that we can still use, HF radio, packet radio, to transmit the store and forward technologies. One of the things that we looked at in our California model, we've got more remote areas younger, I had 2,800 square miles to cover by myself and a deputy. And if someone called in with chest pain, it could take 3 days to get by horseback to that person. And if it was a heart attack, of course, they would have expired by that time. So over the years, California's put together a remote system that connects virtually all of the licensed hospitals in California that are outside the urban areas. That model, of course, wouldn't exactly work in our area, but using some of their technologies and their successes, we could easily put that into play here. But one of the things that we're looking at, it's expensive to leave your job, even for the day, to go sit in the doctor's office for a couple hours while you're waiting to get your exam done, or you're waiting to get lab results or your blood drawn. And we can deliver telehealth services often right to each patient's home. They don't have to leave their home. They don't have to get someone to look for the kids or take time off of work. Most of the new computers and laptops come with built-in cameras, and there's very light technology like Skype and Apple FaceTime. Anybody with an iPhone already has telehealth built into their telephone. There's data capabilities and video, and so as technology spreads with inexpensive phones from Samsung and some of the other vendors, some of them are even free if you just get the service, you now have the ability to talk to any provider anywhere in the world just by getting on a free video program with Skype or Viber or any of those programs on your phone. And it changes the face of how medicine is done. It limits the time. Specialists only have a certain number of hours in the day to review cases. Often they're in surgery and they have a heavy schedule. But if they're able to meet with you before you actually come see them, they can review your case, have an idea of what your diagnosis might be, actually start a treatment plan before you even come see them in your office. So rather than waiting for hours, all of your tests could be done ahead of time, everything's sent to that clinician. You can have a discussion with your primary care provider there or just by yourself. And then once you finally get in to see the specialist, the few minutes of time that they usually give you, which is usually 5 minutes or less for most clinicians, it's valuable time because they already know everything there is to know about you. So it makes a much better time use for the specialist. We can do home monitoring. I'm sure on all of your locations, just as it is here in Guam, Manamco have a very difficult time getting transportation to and from even shopping, let alone healthcare providers. Rarely can you walk into a doctor's office and be seen right away and leave within 15 minutes. That just doesn't happen. So arranging transportation is difficult. When we use telehealth, we can actually monitor patients via telemetry at home. With diabetes, even with cancer care, a lot of the dynamics that we look at can be constantly monitored while the patient's at home rather than having them come to you. And we work a lot with hospital-based programs. The major hospitals around the area in CNMI and Palau and GMH, it's very easy to connect those folks to specialists that can even do, in the best case, telemetry in the hospital or telehealth in the hospital involves a little robot with a monitor and a camera that can wheel around with the team as they see patients. And the specialist at the other end of the monitor can actually talk to the patient. They already have their data. They can see their live information like electrocardiogram and blood pressure and blood results as they case, and their provider in the hospital can discuss with the patient a treatment plan. If that involves going off island, all of that care can be arranged ahead of time so that you get in, get your care, and get home. And that saves time, money, and stress on the patient. And it helps the provider here extend what they can do for individuals outside their specialty. So if we don't have a neurologist somewhere and there's someone with a head injury, that head injury can be treated immediately with a team of neurologists at the other end. And it's not taken away from the talent of the folks in the remote location. It enhances their talent. It teaches them along the way things that they may not know, and vice versa. There are things that I've seen here I've never seen in my career in any other part of the world, and I've learned a lot from not only the disease processes, but every individual that I meet, especially on the spiritual side. I used to run one of the dialysis units here, and the men that I met from the south of this island were extremely spiritual and taught me much more than I could know from traditional medicine on how to treat the person. And so it was really important to listen to folks, and this is one of the neat ways that we can do that. And of course, we know how expensive travel is. We've opened discussions with United Airlines to try and get a telehealth-related pricing so that patients and providers can go intra-island and not have to take a loan out to do it. As we know, since we lost our Continental Micronesia family to the merger, prices have continued to skyrocket, particularly with the jet fuel surcharges. And it's hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to go between locations now. So we will be working closely with the marketing department here locally with United to try and get compassion-based pricing, not just for the family emergency, but any time that someone wants to get care at a different area. If you want to go to CNMI or go from CNMI to here or one of the other islands, it shouldn't cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars to do that. So hopefully we'll be able to get a fund started that might fund that. So I'll stay in touch with you as we work through that with them. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to reach some sort of agreement on reasonable pricing for the area. Anytime someone leaves the island to go take care of someone, whether it's from here to CNMI or Palau, that person's specialty is lost from their home location. So while they're gone, either someone else has to cover for them or their specialty is gone from the island for a period of time. The same with the patients. When they leave the island, whatever their job was, they're missing from their home. And just for economics, doesn't make a lot of sense. If you don't have to travel, it's easier to be treated where you live and you stay in your community. So it's easier on the providers to stay home. It's easier on the patients to stay home. We now have the ability to look at high-resolution images like X-rays. Virtually all of the imaging centers on Guam and CNMI use digital imaging now for radiology. And as we put in new units around the world, most of those are digital instead of using the old film. The old film had silver in it, and that contaminates the environment when you throw those away and presents a lot of problems with developing. So digital technology, there's some limitations to it, but for the most part, it provides diagnostic quality imaging. Well, those images can be sent over the internet virtually anywhere. High-speed connections are almost instantaneous. dial-up connections could take hours. But the point is, you can read those anywhere you're at. So if someone took an image in a remote facility and sent that over, you'd have a team of radiologists locally that would be able to read those images and provide instant diagnosis back to the provider. So we already have some of those capabilities built into the system already here. They're just underutilized. The live video conferencing as a provider, I find it annoying to have to look down at a computer to do medical records rather than the good old way of handwriting my notes. I want to look at my patient and get a rapport so that I can understand exactly what the issue is and that they understand that I care. If I'm not looking at them, it's hard to know what the record is. So as a provider, some of the dynamics involved in the traditional medicine versus electronic medical records and the way that everybody's going, video conferencing at least gives us a face-to-face ability, even if it's over a TV set or a flat panel display. At least I can see someone, look at their expression, see if they're in pain, and it enhances the communication ability. So there's pluses and minuses to the technology. At least video conferencing is one positive thing, where I can look at you and know that you know that I care, that I'm listening to your problem, and that we're going to provide a solution. So it's one of the good things. The downside for video conferencing, some of the equipment can be expensive, upwards of $30,000 or $40,000 for the high resolution equipment. But as simple as an iPhone, it can be free. So it just depends on what kind of service we want to deliver. To see the conferences, as simple as an iPhone, an iPad, any of the tablets that are coming out are relatively expensive. It doesn't have to be the thousands and thousands of dollar machines that we used to use with the government. Things are getting less expensive now. Even a 50 or 60 inch LCD for a group discussion for education is under $1,000 now. So it's not cost prohibitive to provide the services. Later in 2014, one of the things that's missing from this region is a clinical and pathology laboratory. Virtually everything that's done from glass pap smears in Pohnpei to exams in every region here, virtually everything goes off island. We do a few tests here like a blood count or chemistry, but anything that requires advanced diagnosis has to go to Hawaii or California or beyond. And specimens are lost, they're tainted, their temperature is hard to monitor. And I've experienced that firsthand with the lab business here. It's frustrating to send out 150 specimens and find out the package is missing. And among those could have been a biopsy. And that's happened too many times. You don't know that what they just removed from you then is cancer or not. And really there's no excuse. So one of my passions was to make sure that laboratory services are brought on island, so that's one of the projects that we're working on now. Once that's done, all of the biopsies that are done on island or anywhere in the region can be sent here. We can do all the staining and everything that's necessary to make that diagnosis. Now, if it's negative, to get a fast turnaround time, and you know it's a negative, you can breathe a sigh of relief. If it's positive, then normally you would still have to send that specimen off island to a specialist in that type of cancer. With telemedicine or telehealth, we can do a high resolution scan or live microscopy, where you put the scope on a microscope and it has GPS, and the remote reader can actually move the slide around just like it's in front of them live. That's our goal for 2014. And that way we'll have a team of experts. Instead of having to go to City of Hope or any of the other cancer treatment centers, we've got dozens of specialists that have already said yes to this project. So in 2014, we'll start changing the world of medicine out here in the Blue Continent. At least our cancer diagnoses will be swift, and treatment can be started a lot faster once that's up. As part of that, we wanted to find out why we have cancer and diabetes here. So the Research Institute, Asia Pacific Research Institute, will start looking at that. We'll be working with the area universities and bring researchers out. Now that the Supreme Court has held that no one can own a gene or have a patent on a gene, which was holding up research in genomics. For once, the Supreme Court made a very good decision. And now that you can't own a gene or a patent on one, now we can use the Human Genome Project, which mapped all of the genes in the human body, and start to look at what's different about genetics in this region that gives us a propensity for cancer. And my goal before I die is to find that out. So over the next, hopefully 40 years or less, we'll find that answer. But we've begun that process, and I believe that we found the correct partnership with the University of California. And they have health systems. They have 5 hospitals throughout California with the lead researchers in genomics in the United States. And they've agreed to work with us and come to this region to find out what's going on here. So I'm going to skip forward a little bit. Emergency room consults. If we don't have a neurosurgeon on island, then we can get those services instantly, 24 hours a day, just by touching a button. Virtually any specialty that we need can be done. And we can even do remote robotic surgery. Robotic surgery is done every single day in the larger medical centers in the States. Typically, the operator is in front of a micro knife and a really nice set of optics, but it's no different than operating a plane remotely. If you can operate that in the patient in front of you, you can operate it anywhere. Of course, you would really, really want a robust broadband system so that your network doesn't go down right when you're reaching to clip that important thing. You don't want to hear oops on the operating room floor. So some of these things would be reserved to the islands that we know have a very strong backbone for broadband infrastructure, but nonetheless, it could be done remotely. Even teleautopsy can be done. We had a need for that in the last few weeks, and we have a teleautopsy team, but we need to train autopsy assistants in each area so that they're the eyes and ears in doing the procedures for the pathologist at the other end. But that's easy to do, and it's now on the list to be able to go to anywhere in the region and be able to provide a reason for someone's death without having to remove them from their location. The imaging system, just to let you know, that does all of the slides, anything that would be, let's say, a pap smear for women's cancers or any of the biopsies, that system's about $250,000. So it's expensive but necessary, but it's harder to deploy those in many areas because of the expense. But we're working with the manufacturers to see if we can get that cost cut in half or better, so that any grant money that we can get can go a lot further. We can get those those imaging systems out to the outer hospitals. One of the neat things that we found with telehealth is the ability to provide quality care to incarcerated or institutionalized folks. If there's a rest home, for example, remote monitoring can be done on all the patients on a monthly basis. If there's a provider that needs to go off island and they wouldn't be able to get in to do care. Or more importantly, you don't have prisoners being transported to doctor's offices, especially high-risk prisoners, when they're right next to your mom or your sister. That's done in many, many locations, and it's risky. It's very expensive because you need multiple guards, typically 3 guards to take one person somewhere. So if we use telehealth, just start it in our prisons. We can provide excellent care. It's not substandard. It's very good care to the individuals there without physically having to remove them. We just have a small team at that location, and everything that we do in a medical office can be done there. And it's safer and much cheaper. So those are things we can do today. It doesn't cost a lot to do that. One of the frustrating things for me, we have an incredible nursing school in this area, and we have an incredible medical school in Hawaii, and a lot of our local future doctors and nurses go through both programs. But it would be incredible to start growing the next generation of healthcare providers in this region without having to have them leave and have them tempted with the opportunities off island and not come back home. We have training programs for the people who draw your blood, the phlebotomists, but not for the laboratory technicians that run that blood test. So part of the initiative that we're looking at is to bring that level of health education out to the islands so that we can grow our own psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, every modality that we need here. We've got the ability to bring those programs through the accredited universities and have folks have an excellent education at a better price and have a better chance of having that individual remain in the community upon their graduation. University of California and several other universities have agreed to look at a cooperative program to start residency programs here. And one of the things that's important to me with a residency program, if we start having guests come on the islands, is it's transcultural. We want to be able to impart your culture onto them so that you can teach them how to be a better provider. I don't automatically know how to take care of, let's say, a woman from Saudi Arabia. That's a special culture, and there's special privileges and rights in that culture, for example. And it took me several years to understand Ramadan and all the things associated with a pregnancy in that culture. And it's very difficult in the beginning not to offend individuals by our Western ways of conducting medicine. So part of the program is not only having students from here go to other locations for training, but having those students in the other locations come out here for training. And it's going to make them a much better provider in their career to understand other cultures and understand more spiritual medicine rather than just looking at a book and looking at, okay, you have this disease, here's the treatment. There's a lot more to that. There's more spiritual needs for that family and that individual. I've learned that over the years myself. And most of the time when I was birthing with women, I don't like doing that in the hospital. The hospital's for sick people, and and pregnancy is not a disease. Most of my births were at home in their environment. And I found that if I was doing that without other women there, it was an odd experience. Men don't have the spirit that women do when it comes to women's health. So I learned those types of things early on, that I need to have other spiritual people present when I'm doing something like that. So we want two-way communication here. Some of the early telehealth's been around since, well, before the 70s. NASA was one of the first users of it. Mayo Clinic tried it. They worked with NASA doing some remote things. Now, these are $100 a minute technologies back then, using satellite time, expensive satellite time. Today, our satellite cost has come down quite a bit, and we can do satellite video conferencing as low as maybe $10 a minute if you have the right provider. But that entails using Hughes and some of the other companies that manufacture those satellites, getting them to provide some grants for their airtime. But they tried some experiments with low data rate. That would be sending a blood pressure to someone or sending their glucose result. The high data rate would be echocardiograms, live data that you're monitoring, fetal monitoring. And some of those studies showed that you can't use a telephone to send high-speed data across back in those days. So some of what they found was a failure. Much of what we learned from that, though, has gone on to provide excellent compression and data rates now. And we're able to provide excellent communication with some compression algorithms that can be so good that you could actually do surgery over it. And that's the goal. There's a lot of telehealth studies. I'm not going to read those, but every one that's been done, the care that's provided via video or telehealth is as good or better in many cases than the care that would have been rendered just by the individuals at the remote site. The expertise, especially with heart disease and head injuries, is invaluable. It's an expertise that most of us in the medical community don't have unless you work in trauma centers. And usually the video conferencing or telemedicine is a lot less expensive. 10% to me doesn't seem like a lot, but if it's 10% of a $100,000 budget, then that money can be used elsewhere. There's fraud and abuse across all of the systems, but with telehealth, it's been found that there's no additional fraud being used. In fact, less fraud because there's multiple people involved in the care. So no one individual can make money off of telehealth generally, because it's a community of care and not just one single individual. As you know, some of our challenges, tough one is broadband service. I know that I've talked to a couple of engineers that are running private networks out here, and there's fiber to virtually every location. It's just that many of the fiber is privately owned. So we need to identify those owners and start working with them, because if they have individuals at that remote site, they may need care someday. So having them assist us with using their lease lines for communications would be good. Packet radio is another way to do things. It's old technology, but it works from island to island very well. And packet technology is simply sending data stream over ham radio or HF radio, and and that's very easy to do. We've been using that for video for helicopters and other areas for a while. And train the trainer. We can get one individual from each island to go get trained on how to operate telehealth equipment. It's a 2-day program. Then they can go back and train other people. And of course, legislation. For the areas that are under U.S. jurisdiction, there's always the problem with licensing, and virtually everyone in health has a license to do what they do, whether it's a lab tech or a doctor. They're certified, and it doesn't have to be that difficult. I mean, Guam actually has, as is, one of the most progressive telehealth laws in the nation. And with just a little bit of tweaking, we'd be able to use any accredited individual that has an unencumbered license, somebody that has no accusations against them, that has a license in good standing, which should be able to use anyone in their field anywhere to provide services. So that's something that we're working on. We have an association with the godfather of telehealth, happens to be at University of California. He pretty much wrote the book on it, part of the American Telemedicine Association, Dr. Nesbitt, and he's agreed to work with us on this project. In fact, we just had the University of California at Davis here on island 2 weeks ago, and they're extremely impressed with where we're at, and they're thrilled to move forward with us. So we've tried to find the best of the best to help us with this project, and I think we found those individuals. So we can get assistance for anyone in training from the university. And then a little bit about specialty, virtually everything including dentistry. Now, I'm not saying that a dental assistant should be standing there with a drill in front of you while a dentist is on the other end. But if you had an infected tooth, the dental assistant at the remote location could take a digital x-ray, send that to the dentist, and dentistry has had telemedicine for decades. They've had cameras that can look in the mouth and document what's going on for their record. That's inexpensive for them. They could take a look at that tooth and say, yes, it needs to be extracted, start on antibiotics, and come to my office in 3 days. And that would save the patient, because you always have to start antibiotics before you pull a tooth that's infected. It would save them from having to spend money to stay here or another location for 3 days while they start their antibiotics. So even for dentistry, we've got the ability to do remote care. So these are just some of the specialties that are already using telehealth services, but it's unlimited. It can be done even for veterinary medicine. So if your Carabau's not feeling well, you can get that vet on the line and be able to get some advice. So thank you. I appreciate your attention, and can I answer any questions?
Okay, thank you so much. Let's give him a round of applause. Yeah, I think we have time to go ahead and see if we can pose any question to Mark, and afterwards we'll give the opportunity back to Chris to play the video that he wanted to play, and then from there, if we have also a question for him, we'll go ahead. So go ahead, Yap, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question is, because we're on the verge or very close to be connected to the fiber optic, if our good Congress find its way clear to do that, the World Bank people and ADB people who came to YAP to discuss that sort of told us that if we were connected to that cable and broadband, if a patient goes on the operating table in YAP the uh, doctors conducting the operation are not going to be limited to those doctors in that operating room in Yap, but doctors outside, like maybe from the U.S. or from Guam or from Singapore or somewhere, would be also, uh, could be member of that operating team. Thank you.
That's correct. Yeah, if you have a reliable broadband connection, most surgeries in teaching hospitals anyway are already on video. They want to go back and use that for training and educational purposes. So there's already equipment that can be sterilized, that can be right in the operating room, that can provide high resolution imaging, and if the doctor at your location needs assistance or would like an opinion on what they see once they get inside the patient, because that's something, it's one of the things in life we don't know. I mean, we can look at all the CT scans and all the MRIs and have an idea in our mind on what we're going to see when we get inside, but once you've opened the patient, it could be completely different. So you're correct. You can have real-time live conferencing with any number of people in any number of locations. And that's one of the neat things is you can have that expert that's done that procedure 1,000 times right with you in the office.
There's another person who said that a doctor in Miami could be operating a patient in Yap by a robot. There's a robot that the doctor in Miami will be using to operate the patient in Yap. Is that the?
That's also correct. That happens literally every day. In our major medical centers, robotics for prostate surgery, for certain kinds of internal surgeries. We already have, it's typically when you're doing a microsurgery, where you're trying to go in and get a small tumor in a brain, or it's very difficult to get through and grab what you want. We're already using that type of technology, and it's no different because you don't have your hands in the patient. You're looking in a scope, and exactly that. Our kids would be very good at this because they're very good at video games, and that's what's exciting about bringing up the next generation. They're better than we are, and they're already used to doing manipulation while they're looking at something else, and it's brilliant to be able to do that. So we absolutely have that technology and can bring it anywhere. Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Pompey. Telehealth.
Well, I understand. I had that same question. One of the reasons that we looked at having a nonprofit arm to what we're trying to do is so that we were eligible for grants and subsidies from any of the governments in the world, and it's not for profit. So the goal would be providing the opportunity for every single location that wants it to be able to sign up for services. How those will be subsidized, we still have to identify the funding for that. There are grants and foundations across the world that are interested in these outcomes. We're already being watched with this initiative. We'll be one of the first areas in the world that's attempting to do what the entire nation can't do. And if we can solve regulatory issues, for instance, even the most qualified board-certified surgeon who invented a procedure is going to have a time where a patient passes under his care or her care. It's devastating when that happens. But you did everything that you can for that patient, and it's not malpractice. You know, it was, in my opinion, you know, there's times where it's God's intervention that someone passes on, and we just simply can't save them no matter what we do. Those are some of the issues that we need to work out with licensing. I don't believe that anyone that wants to be involved in telemedicine, for the most part, they're experts in their field, and it's not the doctor that I'm worried about that, say, runs from a malpractice suit from Wisconsin and comes out here to hide. That's not the individual we want involved in this. It's going to be the experts in the field. So as far as reliability is concerned, if we're going to be doing robotic surgery, and that's absolutely one of the goals of the program, that can't be done on a dial-up connection. So we would have to have fiber optics to every location, but it can be shared services. So if we had a corporation, a private company that ran their own services for communications purposes, we could lease for that surgery, we can lease time from them, and that's not that expensive in most cases if you don't have full-time connectivity. If it's per use, someone comes into the hospital or the clinic, from an auto accident, and you use the service for 30 minutes, you're billed for 30 minutes. So those are some of the issues we need to work out. But we're just in the beginning of trying to identify those sources, and it doesn't have to come from the United States. It can come from anywhere in the world. So, you know, I'm sure that that China and Russia and all the other visitors here, if someone's here and they're injured, they have an interest in getting better. They want to make sure that if they come here on a vacation or go diving in Palau, and they have a problem, that they're going to be taken care of. So, you know, I don't want to limit ourselves to thinking about just grant money from the U.S. We're looking at it worldwide. So those are some of the issues that we'll stay in touch with you as we identify those.
Okay, thank you. And I believe Saipan like to post a question or maybe two. Let me give this opportunity then to Saipan. Go ahead, speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mark. I think I have a few questions, but let me start with something that I just kind of thought of as you were talking about tourists. I think this may have another potential as well. In the CNMI, we've been trying to develop our silver market, which is trying to entice retirees from other countries, Japan, to resettle in our islands and have, you know, the problem, the big challenge we've had is they want, their biggest concern is having access to their doctors or Japanese doctors that can understand their language and so forth, they can relate to. And that's been a problem because of U.S. federal laws that prohibit foreign doctors from practicing in jurisdiction. I think the only waiver is Canadian doctors. But I think through this, we may have the mechanism to be able to have them through video conferencing or so forth still be consulted by their doctors or Japanese doctors without physically bringing in those doctors to the islands, which is prohibited by law. So I'm just thinking forward that this may have other applications that, or can create possibilities that, at least in our case, is not there. Or
Yes, that sounds intriguing. Now, it's my understanding, though, that you still have the autonomy to create your own law surrounding who can practice and who can't practice in your jurisdiction. The federal government can't tell you, in my opinion, and I'm not an attorney, but the federal government can't tell you who can practice. They can say, if your hospital is going to be accredited, that you need to have a CLIA license for your lab, and you need to follow certain rules if you want Medicare reimbursement. But if you have a private clinic with Japanese staff, and you have telehealth connectivity to Japan, and those providers in Japan provide information and suggestions to the providers that are on Saipan, and you write law that allows that, I don't see how the federal government, as long as it's not Medicare associated, I don't see how the federal government has any business in your business.
I am not even sure where the restrictions come, whether it's the certification, whether it's the grant. We're bound by the grant conditions. I do know that foreign doctors can practice if they were trained at U.S. accredited
did a residency
institutions. Otherwise, they cannot.
Well, that's at the hospital. In a private clinic setting, I think there's a different parameters, but certainly you had the opportunity to open a great conversation with public health, and I think that in looking at the next 5 years for your future, if you start crafting a caveat and we certainly want opportunities for tourism here. Guam's going to be the same issue with our friends from Russia, and if China is ever allowed to come here, that's going to be a big deal. And I think we need to start looking at ways to carve out a pilot program and have it just that, make it a pilot program where you're allowed to do that. You're allowed to look and see if it works, and then we'll see, let's work on ways around it. I understand exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, thank you. Looks like we may have no more question for Mark, so let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mark. At this time, I'll give back to Chris to go ahead and play the 3 minutes video clip that he's asked us to watch. And then from there, if we have any further questions for Chris, then we'll proceed for maybe 10 minutes or so. But while Chris is setting up, during our lunch and before we come back in the afternoon, if I can pose this question for us to start thinking about it. The theme for Majuro meeting as agreed, or will be agreed, or it depends on how we make the decision, but it's on regional transportation and communication. So if we can start thinking about what we want to do and who we want to invite to come to this General Assembly in Majuro. So over the lunch, we can start discussing it before we come into our session. So I think Chris is ready. So I'll go ahead and give back the podium to Chris.
Okay, many thanks, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, Acting President, is it? So the context of this very short video is the University of Lugano in Switzerland, who have offered to share their knowledge and their research on the e-learning to help the community of teachers, and also the tourism industry. and they've had some background in doing that. So they've made this. They've made this video, and so it's only for 3 minutes, and you'll hear directly from the professor. So I'll play it right now for you.
Hello, my name is Lorenzo Cantoni. I'm professor and Dean of the Faculty of Communication Sciences at the Università della Svizzera Italiana, University of Lugano in Switzerland. I'm really happy to introduce briefly 3 research lines we have in our labs and to show possible collaboration activities. The first research line is about information and communication technologies for development, so-called ICT 4D. And what we have done so far, we have done projects in Brazil, South Africa, Mozambique, and Cameroon, studying both how to implement in a sustainable way digital technologies for teacher training and in order to be used also in their classes, as well as studying telecenters, access technologies, and the social meaning which is attached to such access centers. Then we have studied a lot e-learning. I'm currently directing a PhD school together with the Polytechnical School in Lausanne and the University of St. Gallen about digital technologies and the relationships between formal and informal learning, how ICT can sort of bridge between the two ends of learning. And we are also running a quite successful website called e-learning for tourists, studying how e-learning has been implemented within the tourism industry. And exactly e-tourist, so ICT within the tourism industry and experience, is the third research line. And we are studying especially how people are commenting on the so-called social web or Web 2.0 about destinations. So all those 3 research lines have in a sense a common umbrella which has been provided by a UNESCO chair approved by UNESCO a few weeks ago. And the chair is titled ICT to Develop and Promote Sustainable Tourism in World Heritage Sites. So I believe that we could find possible collaboration activities in one or more research lines. So be it studying how digital technologies can improve development, studying how those technologies can be used in order to improve teaching and learning. It's not just enough having access to them, but we need to help people use them in the best way, and how they can be leveraged in order to ensure communication with tourists and prospects in order to develop sustainable tourism there. So hope we can collaborate together in the near future, and thank you for your attention.
Okay, so I think that's just one example of the assistance that's out there that we can draw in to the islands. And I must say that the last presentation from Mark is another example of there's just the wonderful stuff that we can connect into the islands if we can get our connectivity and connect it to the continent. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Chris. If I can have, if aside from the question that were posed by Guam, if there is any more question from anybody, this is the opportunity for Chris. Well, looks like we're ready for lunch, I think. So let's give Chris another round of applause again. Okay, I think we'll take a break since we're a little early on the break. That's good. And Pew Environment Group is hosting us, so we'll go ahead and join them in the other room. So We're adjourned until afternoon.